Going live.
Hey y'all, I am James Wright and welcome to my shop. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at dados, not grooves, and we'll talk about what the difference of those two are because that has really confused quite a few people. So yes, we're going to be doing dados. We're going to look at a couple different ways to do it, and we're also going to look at making stopped dados. So the whole 9 yards. It's going to be a lot of fun. For those of you who are new to the lives, we do these every Tuesday. If you are watching this recorded, then you can see down in the description down below, we have all the questions that have been asked with timestamps beside them, so you can actually read through those and jump around to the questions you want to see. If you are watching this if you are watching this live, then go ahead and throw your questions in the chat, and we will get to them as we have time available. Yeah, and then I also do any upcoming notes for the week or any things to come at the beginning of the live. So if you ever want to stay tuned with what's happening in the Wood by Wright world or woodworking world in general, watch the first few minutes of the live and you'll get caught up with that. Speaking of which, we just came back from the MWTCA and it was an absolute hit. This year was phenomenal. Really good year. So yeah, I had a lot of fun. Wish my wife could have come, but I took my daughter and we enjoyed it. I didn't purchase that much for myself. I actually only spent like, $50 on a few odd things that will be showing up in a couple videos. But most of the things I purchased were for other people. So it was a lot of fun. Next meeting I have coming up is, man, I don't think I have any coming up until like, January?
I thought you had one in November.
I might have one in November, so stay tuned for that.
Maybe not. Maybe I'm just...
Yeah. No, I just got confirmation. I am going to be speaking at the Workbench Con in March. So if you're going to be in, where's that, Georgia, Atlanta, we'll be at Workbench Con. So looking forward to seeing that. So yes, dados. The big question is dado or groove. A groove goes with the grain. A dado goes across the grain. So it is the cross-cut version of the cut, whereas the ripping would be the groove. If you really want to get technical, a dado is also a groove, but a groove is not a dado. So, yay. And I'm sure that there's plenty of people who argue the other way around. But yes, we are going to be making dados, so we're going across the grain. And once you can go across it, you can go with it. They're very similar in how they work out, except for there are things you have to worry about that going across the grain, but you don't have to worry about them when you go with the grain. So that makes a lot of things easier. Let me grab this before I forget. So we're going to start with the basic way of using a dado plane. Now, I don't actually have a dedicated dado plane because I have a Stanley 45 and a Stanley 55, and they do it quite well. So I'm going to show you how to set this up for it and what you kind of need with it. The big difference with going with the grain as going across the grain is that you're going to end up with splinters coming off. So I'm going to show this a little closer up in here. And right in here, if I take my chisel and I come in with the grain, let's see if I can do this. I'm going to get this really nice curl, except for I'm going to blow out and run into my hand, which is be on the other side. And I can actually make a groove with just a chisel like that. And I can eventually, every time I take another shaving off, I'll get nice crisp walls because, let me see if I can come down a little farther, because I'm going with the groove, so I can rip those out. But if I want to go across the wood, now I'm going to have problems. There's no way I'm going to be able to get a crisp wall because these are going to keep splintering out on the sides. So in order to fix that, I need to cut them ahead of time. So I could come in with a knife, let me do it down here, and I could mark off this space and this space. I could come in with a knife, and now I can come in, well, actually I made it a little bit smaller than my chisel. Let me come down a size. The almost never used 3/8. And we're going to come in here, and now I can pair out between those two cut lines, and I can get relatively clean sidewalls because I've cut them ahead of time. Then to go in a little deeper, we'll come in and we'll score it down, and we'll go in a little bit deeper. So I mean, you don't need all of the fancy tools to do it. If you have a knife and a chisel, you can very slowly and very carefully make a dado. Strip over all those fibers. There you go. A very nice, clean line on there. But ain't nobody got time to do it all freehand. So today we're going to look at doing it with the Stanley 45. And in here I have, what, about a 1/4 inch iron? Yeah, a 1/4 inch iron in there. And what I can do with this is this actually has two knives built in. So in one pass, it will not only cut out the wood, but the two knives will stick down on either side and they will score the wood. And here, let me get this into a good position so that the camera can see it. And focus up. There we go, and 3. So in here, I've got these things in front. These are spurs or knickers, depending upon which side of the pond you are from and what your background is in. And so what I can do is take the screw, make sure I get my hand in the image, and I can unscrew this tiny, tiny little screw. Now this screw will fall off and it will roll away and you will never, ever, ever see that little thing again. So be very careful with it. Then I can take this spur and I can pop it out. Let me get a smaller screwdriver, something in that hole. And this has 3 different heads on it. Let me see if I can get a close-up on that. Oop, come on. Without it sliding away. There's 3 different heads on there. And I want to find the one that is sharp and clean and ready to go, which is this one here. And we can rotate that so that that head sticks down a little bit farther. Make sure we're focused again. There we go. And then very, very, very carefully, try and get that screw back in there. You want to make sure that spur is sticking down. That spur should stick below the sole of the plane just a little bit. And this is tedious and difficult and slow. And I think I have some dust underneath this, so I may have to back it out, pull that out and try again. Is that a super chat?
It is a super chat.
Well, I fiddle with this. What do we got?
House at Wrong Town says, gotta start work down here in Australia. I hope you have a great stream.
Ah, well, good morning to you down there.
I'm not going to pretend.
Sorry, you guys started daylight savings time already, so everyone's
yeah.
Up a little bit. There we go. Now I got it down to that slot. And these are fiddly. They take a little bit of work, but it's amazing what they do. Now, one of the things you're going to find is when you get an old Stanley 45 or 55, it's rare that they actually come with the spurs, or the spurs are worn out and need to be replaced. I've seen some people cut them out of pieces of hacksaw blade. There are a few places where you can buy them online. I know of at least one guy who makes replacements. Well, he does from time to time. He makes batch orders and you have to kind of get on the list. But they are fun. So I'm going to do the other one here. We got any questions on?
No, but we owe a mom joke.
Ah, what we got?
Okay, this one's going to be cheesy. You ready for a cheesy one?
I'm ready for a cheesy one.
What's Frosty the Snowman's favorite Mexican food?
What?
Burritos.
Oh.
I didn't get
that one's good.
I gotta look up more, guys. I'm behind on my mom jokes.
Getting this second screw in without dropping the screw and letting it roll away. I usually set a magnet underneath it so if it falls off, the magnet catches it. Didn't do that this time, so I'm tempting fate. Magnets are a great tool in the shop. So now we've got these 2 spurs sticking out. They're basically marking knives that stick out in front of the iron here. So we've got our 2 spurs here, and then we've got our cutting iron here. So as the wood passes by, it hits both of those spurs before it hits the cutter and cuts out. So theoretically, I can, and I usually start on the backstroke to make sure I get it scored right. And then I'm going to come forward, except I don't have any fence on here, so it's going to slide around a bit. So I've got this one set up and lined up. And since I don't have a fence on the plane, that will work well. I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to come in here and set this down. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to work smarter.
What?
Rather than messing up on a live.
What?
I know. Actually, I'm going to do it with these. I'm going to clamp this down in place. Oh, I can't. I'm going to work dumber. Actually, I know what I'm going to do. The problem is I have these rails sticking on the side, and so as my hand slides by, it's going to hit those on the rails. So what I can do is I can loosen up those 2 rails. I can slide them out of the way. Or I could dig through my stash and try and find my short rails. But today, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to extend these rails out the one side so that they are not in the way on this side. So now my 45 looks really, really weird. But hey, it's out of the way. I'm going to set this on here. What am I running into now? Oh, helps to have the iron actually extended. There's always something.
There to remind me.
This one needs some persuading. Lock it down. Try it again.
Eye is drippy.
What's that?
So my eye is drippy. I'm turning into my mother. She always had a drippy eye.
Oops, slitting. Why are you not working now? You were working earlier.
So they can
There we
see
go.
what it looks like once in a
Let me
while.
switch this over. Make sure those are in the groove. Make sure I am sticking out. No, I'm not. I'm still not sticking out. Of course I'm not. I am. I am.
You
Better than I thought I
always
was.
stick out, James.
So I tightened down one side, but I didn't tighten down the other side. And also the lives are known as comedy with Wright.
Oh, I didn't put my rings back on after my shower. I'm a single lady.
Go back on. There it goes. A little bit of mushrooming on the end of that rod. It doesn't want to slide past. There. Let's try this again. So once you eventually get an edge on there, you technically shouldn't need this anymore. And I think what's happening is my spurs are actually a little too tall.
Are you pretty sure about that?
And they're not crushing down into the wood because I'm using a hard maple, oak right now. So let me try moving it down just a little bit more. I have to do that to loosen up on this one because it's annoying. Right there. Let's give that a try.
Which camera do you want to be on?
What's that?
Which camera do you want to be on?
Trying to get it up and running first. Let's move over to this one.
Okay.
Okay. This one's going to be a slaughter monkey.
A slaughter monkey.
Now, normally, what you do is you come in and you do several tests beforehand. You make sure it's all up and working. And it was all up and working, but I took the spurs out so I could show you how to do that. And then something threw out. And I moved the rods over. The last time I had a board, I clamped it on there. Oh no, I jumped off the side. Okay, now this one's going to look horrible. Because I don't have a fence on there. And I'm not taking my time. And now that I have a groove established, excuse me, a dado established, it rides in that dado pretty nicely. And I can take that down to depth. Except for I guard it all up with those first few passes. So it looks pretty horrible. But you can go pretty quickly, pretty deep. And the sidewall down in there actually looks relatively nice. But the top of that is bad. Now, to be honest, if I have a dado to cut, this seems like the way to go. A dado plane, well, that's what it... I don't need to fade to black. Sorry about that. The dado plane seems the way to go. I mean, it's the idea. It's a dado plane. It's what it's made to do. Whenever I make dados, I don't use a dado plane. I find them to be a little more work than they're worth, unless you're making the same dado a lot of times. And then you can set up something and really have fun with it. But I find them to always just miss the mark a little bit. So usually, I make them by hand. And I'm going to grab my sash saw and a chisel.
You're so sassy.
And a router plane. And we're going to use those instead. And I'm going to do it without the router plane to show you that because I know everyone doesn't have one. And we're going to do another one just beside this the first thing I want to do is lay out where I want it to be. I'm going to set my square on here, and move this over so you can see a little bit closer. Here. Hey, look at that. So let's move another one right here. That looks like a good spot for dado. So I'm going to do that there, and I'm going to move over to, yeah, around there. Let me make sure I can get my chisel in there. Ah, perfect. And I'm going to make this here. And then I'm going to get my saw. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to pinch the board, I'm going to let this slide against my thumb. And I'm going to start my nick over here just like a regular cut. Those chisels are bouncing against each other. And I'm going to let this slowly come back and make this all the way along this line. And now I'm down to about here. Slowly bringing it back across that line. The nice thing about this is I know I'm going to get a really nice crisp edge, as long as I don't jump out of the saw cut, which is just about did there. And here, let me show you one of the problems that I often find myself doing, is when you're making a long cut through a board, you want to make sure that the saw goes all the way through. You want to have the chips ejecting out. So you want to make sure your pass goes all the way through so that the middle of the saw comes out this side, and at least the middle of the saw comes out this side. Otherwise, if you're just doing short strokes and the middle stays in the board, it's just going to clog up with junk. And I'm going to silence my phone. Otherwise, someone on the live chat is going to know my phone number and be like, oh, let's message him now. So I cut that down to depth and repeat and do the other side. What is rattling? There's something rattling over here.
There's something rattling.
Oh, that's what's rattling. Ha, I see it. All the way through, James, all the way through. And the next question I'm going to get is, what happens if I need to cut a dado in something that's much bigger? This board is about, what, 7 inches across? Yeah, about 7 inches across. What happens if I need to cut it across a foot, 2 foot, 3 feet? The exact same thing. It's just with that, you're going to need to be far more careful. I'm usually going to cut down to depth on the far side and then bring it back. And then I'm going to be doing long strokes that go all the way through. The problem with that is I'm probably going to want bigger teeth. Because you need a place for that dust to go. Otherwise, it's going to start jamming up the blade. And that's when you cause the blade to jump out. So usually I'm going to use a larger tooth saw, but it's the exact same thing over a longer distance. Next, I'm going to come in with a chisel, and I'm going to choose this mallet, carving mallet. Why? Because I like my carving mallet. It is one of my favorite mallets. And then we're going to come in. Make sure I can get this in focus the way I want it to. Not quite that tight. There we go. Then I'm going to come in with this, and I'm going to use it bevel down, about halfway down to the depth I want. I'm going to ride that bevel. And then eventually I'm going to get close to the other side. That thing's really getting annoying. Turn it around. And I'm going to do the same thing from this side. We've got a groove. Then I'm going to take it down close to the depth I want. And I don't know exactly what depth I want on this, but I'm going to need something like that. Then I'm going to grab my router plane. Now, let me do this without the router plane first. The idea then is to come in and get close to that depth and use this stabbing motion, and it becomes very, very easy to find where the high spots are. Because very, very rarely does the dado need to be perfectly flat on the bottom. It just needs to have no high spots. And right here at the entrance and exit, I'll come in just detail it a little more. And then I can come in with a depth gauge. I made this one a while ago. And I can set it to whatever the depth I want. I want to go this deep. And I can come across this way and then actually check and make sure that I'm the depth I want all the way across. But most of the time, that's where a router plane really comes into handy. It's made for routing. And a dado, though it's not a groove, is still a route. I'm going to stick in my 1/2-inch blade. So I had the 1/4 inch earlier. And yes, I've had a bunch of people ask me, I want to do a video on the new Cat's Moses router plane. I don't have one in stock yet. So sometime I will get my hands on one and I'll make a video on it. So I'm going to set it down here, see where I'm at. Okay. And then, when you want to do micro adjusting, don't loosen this screw in the back. First thing you want to do is run this nut down until it touches the bottom of the groove and keep it there. Then loosen this nut and let that drop down. Tighten it back up. And this whole bit has moved down by the slop in this nut. That's just about the perfect amount to come through and get a really nice clean cut. So don't loosen this. Move the nut down a little bit. Now loosen it. Let it fall down. Tighten it up. It's very quick, very accurate to get a very small movement every time. One more time. Loosen that. Loosen that. Tighten that. There. Now I'm getting a good clean pass all the way across. Really nice clean dado. Ta-da! Very, very nice dado that you can then slide in whatever piece of work you're intending to put in there. And I love the saw cut because you get a really nice clean cut all the way down. There's less chance of garring it up and things like that. So most of the time, if I'm making a dado, I'm going to do it with a saw and a chisel and a router and be done with it. It's amazing how, if you're doing probably up to like 4 or 5, maybe 6 of them, I find this to be faster than setting up a dado plane just right. Because most of the time with the dado plane, there's just a lot of other fiddling things. You have to have a fence on the board or a fence running off of it. And then you have to make sure all of your spurs are good and sharp. And one wrong slip on the face of the board and it's going to really make it bad. So I generally prefer to just do it with a saw and chisel. Any questions before I move on?
I mean, there are
22. I'm actually doing really quick.
questions. I don't know if
Because next we're going to do a stopped dado.
Are you going to go over a technique difference between cutting a dado with a routing plane versus a plow plane? Alex Adams wants to know.
That's basically the difference.
That was the difference.
Yep.
Okay. What was the next question? Hoptman6, do you have any of the Stanley dado planes?
No, I don't actually. I've got the 78, which you can do it, but only has the spur on the one side. But no, I don't have any of the Stanley dado planes. I'm very, very hesitant to use a standard dado plane. And I guess I'm kind of doing that with this. But the problem is, then you have to make sure that your boards match the dado you can create. Because if you can make a dado, that's the dado it is. And I find it much easier to make the dado match the boards I have than make all the boards match the dado. I know it's 6 of one, half dozen of another, but that's just my personal preference. So usually, that's why one of the reasons why I love doing it with a saw and chisel is I can make that dado any width I want. I can put the board on here, and I can mark exactly how wide that board is and know perfect fit right off the line. And that's just something I really like being able to do. So it's another reason why I kind of stay away from doing it with a dedicated dado plane or something else. But yeah. So stopped dado. This is all good and nice, but a lot of times when you're making a dado, you don't want it to go all the way through. You want to actually stop it. And that kind of gets, because you can't make the saw go all the way through. If you're using a dado plane, it can't go all the way through. So at some point you have to have a stopped section of it. And so I'm going to actually lay this out and do something very, very similar. So far it's just, let's make it go about, let's make it a longer one. Let's actually make it like the drawers would normally be and stop about 3/4 inch from the end. It's going to take a little longer to do, but we got some time on hands. Let me make sure it's at least the width of the chisel. Otherwise I have to get a different chisel. And then, the most important thing, we have to create a stop mark on the end here. So on this one, we're going to be working over here. Oop. There we go. Focus. And now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create my stop mark with the chisel because it doesn't really matter where it's at. Normally I would come in with a knife and mark it out exactly. But there's where we're going to be. Now, in this case, I want to do a little more work on this before I bring the saw in. So I'm going to grab a larger chisel. This is a 1 inch. And I'm going to come in here and basically make a first class cut. So I'm going to be doing a knife wall. I know, Paul Sellers would be very proud.
I was like, what? You know what song should be the theme song for tonight's show?
What's that?
Dado, Dado.
Come and take more home. So, yeah, I don't do a whole lot of first class cuts. Mostly because it's one more step. And if you get good with the saw, it's not really necessary. But as a beginner, this is a really nice thing because it kind of holds the saw in place. But in this case, I'm going to be doing a lot of chisel work. And so it's nice to have this first bit established and clean. And it just makes everything hold in a little bit better. And then I'm going to come in with this. And particularly up here, I'm going to go right into my line. I'm going to give it one good whack. Move over a little bit. Right into the line, one good whack. And here, this isn't actually boring because there's no circular hole, but it does get to be a bit boring. Got any questions while I'm doing this?
Let's see. Jerome Ulrich asked, I have a harder time working softwood, i.e. pine, than hardwood with chisels. Why is that, and any advice?
Softwoods crush. They don't cut. So your chisels have to be far more sharp to do softwoods. That's even more apparent when you're using a card scraper. The softer the wood is, the harder it is with card scrapers. So it really comes down to being sharp. And they may feel sharp and they may work sharp. And they'll work perfectly fine on a hardwood, but then you take them over to a softwood and you get these crushing fibers. Because the wood is far more spongy, and therefore they fall in. They crush. Bang, bang instead of bang? Yeah, I know, I'm double hitting. Why? Because I want to. So, I've got that cut down in. Now I'm going to come in with the saw. Well, okay, first thing I'm going to do is actually come in with the router plane or whatever I'm going to have, and I'm going to mark my depth of cut with the router plane. And so this will give me a mark here on the edge where I need to come down to. And so normally my router plane would be set up to that, or I'd have a marking gauge set up for that depth. How deep do I want this groove to be? 1/4 inch, whatever. And then I can come in with this, and on this side I'm going to work from my side here, and I'm going to cut down to my depth. Now, if I don't care about the back here, I'm going to cut down even farther. Let me move this around so you guys can see a little bit better back here. Ooh, don't pull the cable. Uh-oh, gotta fix that. There we go. Don't cut the cable either. Okay, where are we? There we are. And up.
Isn't it strange the only cord that's appropriate to cut is the one that's attached to a human being?
So if I don't care about this side, I can cut down a little bit deeper past that line, but most of the time I do. So I'm going to stop at that cut. And now I'm going to cut diagonal from here as far as I can that way. This just saves you a lot of chisel work. There. I've cut down here and made my way as far that way as I can. Now I'm going to come in with the chisel, bevel down, go about halfway down to that cut. And we're going to remove as much as we can. I come about halfway down to that cut again. I want to do the final cut with the router plane, so I'm going to stay away from it. Now you'll see I'm getting all these little splinters coming up here, and that lets you know you haven't cut down that deep yet, which at that point it's not a problem. But if I get up here close to the edge, it may actually blow out some of the final stuff. And so I can just do it with a knife here, and I can come in and cut those off, and cut this down, and then come in with this again, and then cut down a little deeper. And then come in with the knife again, and rinse and repeat. It is a little bit slow, but it's actually kind of enjoyable. Or I could come in with a chisel rather than knifing it back and forth and back and forth. Set that right under the line and make this side a bit deeper. The nice thing with the chisel is it cuts a little bit deeper than the knife can, so you do it a little less often. Switch over to this one. I'm going to stay away from the end of the dado for right now. Come into this, bevel down. And I actually want to, let me move this in, focus there. I'm going to come in a little bit closer to the end here. I want to be very careful I don't blow out the end. So the stabbing motion is not a great one for this because it's really, really easy to blow out. I'm still a little ways away, so it's a little faster. But in this case, as I get close to the end, I want to come in here and use the mallet. The mallet gives you way more control. When I get really close to that end, and then I want to make sure that my cut is deep enough so I don't blow out. Now I'm getting really close to it, so I'm going to go right into that. Oops. I set my tripod on something, and it moved. So there, we're right up to the final end here. Bring back in this one. And rinse and repeat. Take out your aggression and all those things that guy said in the comments that hurt my feelings.
This is the real reason you got into hand tool woodworking as a stay-at-home dad.
Yes. There's a lot of truth to that one. Yeah. Then come back in. Take it down a little deeper. One of the cool things about stop dados in particular is one of the big things that set apart power tools from hand tools is power tools can make a 90-degree inside corner. They have some issues with it, and a lot of times they have to come in from one side or the other side, or they have a router that's spinning. But a power tool cannot make a perfectly clean three-dimensional corner. You can come in with a vibra saw and get it kind of close. You could do a mortising tool, but it's always going to leave some remnants, or the saw is going to be vibrating over. Whereas with chisels, you can make a three-dimensional inside corner. And there's just one of those really interesting things that, yeah, you can do that with this, and it actually is a little bit more difficult with power tools. Of course, a lot of times on the inside corner, it doesn't really matter. If you go past your line and the inside isn't great, who cares? So power tools are perfectly fine there. But every now and then, it's like, ooh, this really matters. Oh, I'm using that one again. It's like, why isn't this hitting as hard as I want? That's better. That feels good. Almost there. And so I have this set up to our previous depth. So I want to see how close we are. Yeah, we're pretty good. We need a little bit more right here at the end. So one more whack whack on either side. Whack whack. And I am going to come down this inside wall. Just tap that down a little bit. Make sure I get a good clean connection there. And then, got a little bit more to remove up here at the nose. Now let's come in with a router and see what we can do. So the router then can come in and do that final cut. Since we stayed away from the depth, just takes that one more pass. We got a really nice clean stopped dado. Very, very happy. Yeah, it's one of those things that's kind of fun, and it is very, very pleasing to do that. And then if you want to make it a stopped sliding dovetail, you take this and you take the chisel, you put it right on the inside corner. Here, let me flip it around and show you. So I can put it right here on the inside corner to whatever bevel I want. Tap that back, move over. Tap that back, move over, and I can continue this right down the edge. And then I can come into the router that can kind of reach into that corner and remove that waste that we just chopped back to. And so now we have this undercut sliding dovetail. Yeah, and that's all there is to it. It's one of those things that it seems difficult. And to get it really, really sharp and clean, it does take a decent amount of skill. But most people, after practicing it once or twice, can jump into it and make a perfectly functional stop to dovetail relatively easily. Yes, you do have to saw close to the line. And if your sawing skills aren't quite there, you can do it completely with the chisel and just chop in rather than actually sawing down to it. And that works perfectly fine. But once your skills get there with the saw, it becomes a lot faster. So yeah, we went through this a lot faster than expected. Things actually worked out pretty well other than that first router. So what questions do we have, babe?
Let's see. Well, plain old woodworking wanted to know if I knew about your trade.
My
With
trade?
the Stanley 45 hollow and rounds for a saw.
No, I don't think I told you.
No.
Yeah, here's the saw I'm trading. It's actually one of my favorites.
I was going to say, isn't it the one you use all the...
No, it's very similar to the one I use. It's about 1.5 inches shorter, but it's an Atkins perfect grip, and it's just, yeah, it's one of those grips that just feels good in the hand. Really good horns on it, really good condition. It's not one of their older ones, but it still has a slight etch on it, and 5 PPI, make a really good rip saw. So yeah, I'm trading him this for a set of hollow and rounds additions for the Stanley 45, because I've been wanting to show that in a video. Those things often cost more than the Stanley 45.
Hey, as I told them earlier, the bench is clean. You can get away with a little bit more.
Yeah. I should.
You should show.
I should show this amazing, miraculous thing that hasn't happened in probably 1.5 years.
Except you already put a piece of paper on it.
Oh yeah, I already started covering Sarah's bench. Look, there's nothing on Sarah's bench, and for once, my shop is actually relatively clean, which is really nice. I spent like the last 2 days working on cleaning the shop, so I actually have some space in here. Oh, I have had a bunch of people asking me about the rubber floor since I've had it now for, 1.5 years, 2 years.
Wow.
Or something like that now. So I'm probably going to be putting a video out about that. But the basic gist is, I so wish I had done this a long time ago. It is probably the best upgrade to my shop since the bench. Yeah, I like it. So, what else we got?
Hang on.
Ooh, she's putting blue nails on.
I know, like your planes.
It's camouflage for the shop.
I can steal a plane and you won't know now. Hey, I want you to know. Actually, I should tell you that I hid something and then make you wonder, but I did not have the time to do that while you were gone. Handy Puttbach.
That's why I cleaned the shop.
I bought a spokeshave from Tay Tools. I have tried it once or twice, but it chatters badly. Not sure what is wrong. I did try and put an edge on it before I used it.
sounds like it's not sharp. If a spokeshave is chattering, it's doing usually one of two things. One, it's sticking out too far. You take a finer cut. Or two, it's not sharp. And most of the time it's not sharp. That's usually the biggest indicator for me that, hey, I should stop what I'm doing and go sharpen the iron. Because they are a pain to sharpen and get right because they are so small. Paul Sellers has a really good video on sharpening them using vice grips. I think I've done a couple videos on that as well. But it makes it a lot easier to use the vice grips as a jig to sharpen it. So take a look at that. But most of the time it's that. The other thing you can do is every now and then the wood itself has the grain, and so the grain kind of catches it and it bounces and you get this chatter. And so if you're coming at it 90 degrees on, then skew the iron so you're coming at it at an angle, and it will kind of ride across the tops of those so you can get rid of the previous chatter. Because if you have chatter in there and you come at it from the same angle you came at before, you're almost always going to fall into that same chatter and it's just going to bounce again. So angle it differently than you had and it will help take care of that. But most of the time, just not quite sharp enough. So, yeah.
Wow.
That's one of the fun things with spoke shaves is that there's nothing to them. So the cheap ones are just as good as the expensive ones. And you don't need to have a flat sole. You don't need to have anything else nice on them. It's just a body that holds a blade. And it all comes down to that blade and getting it sharp. So have fun. What's next?
Okay, so we're going to go back to the floor since you brought up that topic. One wanted to know, is it in small pieces or one big piece? And the other wants to know, does the workbench sit on top of the flooring?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, you can go back. I did the entire video on installing it. If you search for wood by Wright rubber flooring, it'll come up. It is in rolls, and if I remember correctly, they were 3-foot rolls, or were they 4-foot rolls? Let me see. See if I can find the seam. It's 4 feet. Yeah, that's right, because I had a 2-foot strip on the side. So my room is 10 feet across. Yeah, so they're rolls that were, I think, 25 feet long by 4 foot. Very, very heavy. I opted not to go with the 1/2 inch, and originally I was thinking, I should have gone with the 1/2 inch. I went with the 3/8. And honestly, I really like the 3/8. And if I had to do it again, I'm going with 3/8. My thought was that the 3/8 wouldn't stay flat, and it really has stayed flat. I'm really, really happy with it. So yes, it is floor-to-floor rubber flooring. Floor-to-floor rubber flooring. Here, let me show you. So we've got flooring down here, and why are you so tight? Oh, I have that tightened up, that's why. There we go, that's better. So it goes underneath everything, and yes, it even goes underneath the bench. And it is a very, very hard rubber. It is not...
squishy.
Yeah, it's not like playroom floor foam rubber. It is wrestling mat, not wrestling mat, it is gym rubber. It is the same rubber as you'd find for horse mats. So it's got a tiny bit of give, but it's really hard. So you can put heavy machinery on it. If you had a really heavy thickness planer, you could roll it around on this without any problem at all. It won't bubble up in front of it. It's down and solid. And no, I don't glue it down either. It's just sitting on this. So if I do want to move, I can roll it up and take it with me. You can get it with puzzle pieces, 2 foot by 2 foot, but those are a little more expensive. They'd be far easier to put down because you can do them piece by piece. They're easier to carry around than big hunk and roll. But if I had to do a whole shop, I would do the rolls. There's less seams, and you have to look for the seams sometimes. I mean, this one here isn't great because it's an end butt joint, but the long seams running down the room, actually I can't even find this one right now.
Over here.
I know there's a seam right here because it's 4 feet from the wall, and I started from that wall. That I can't find it. It's really, really good stuff. So yeah, and I drop tool. Watch this. Dropped it tip down. I don't care because I have the rubber there and it actually works. And it used to be when I dropped something off the bench, I'd be like, quick, grab it. And now I'm like, ooh, step away. The floor will catch it. And it's much safer that way. And it's easier on the feet. It's quieter in the shop. It dampens a bit. It sweeps actually it sweeps just about as easily as the concrete does. You see more dust on it because it's all a nice black and the dust tends to be lighter. But it sweeps about the same as concrete does. And yeah, I love it. It is absolutely phenomenal. It's expensive, but phenomenal. And it's really not that expensive. It's about the same price as what I would put into making a really good bench. And for the shop, it is just as good of an investment for the shop as the bench was. So yeah, I'm happy with it.
Cheaper than the hospital bill for trying to catch the chisel.
Yeah, my only bad hand tool accident has ever been is I have a cut across here, and I had an 1.5 inch chisel roll off the bench, and I saw it about to roll off, and my brain calculated its fall and realized that if I got my hand down there, I could catch it on the way down. But it rolled off the bench a little slower than my hand was expecting, and my hand got there just in time for the chisel to go and it probably should have gone in and got chiseled with stitches, but I got a white paper towel and I got some duct tape. And
you didn't want to hear me nagging you at work. Let's be honest. That was the real.
Yeah, you can go back and watch a few videos where I have this big, massive thing on my hand, and that was just because I didn't want it to hit the concrete floor. But now I'd be like, I don't care, get out of the way, let it hit the floor. I don't care. It's a phenomenal thing. So if planes fall, things like that, it protects them. It's just a phenomenal investment. So enough about that. What's the next question?
All right. I don't know that any of these questions are directly related to the topic originally. So
okay,
we're more into a Q&A now.
Cool. We got about 15 minutes left. We'll see what we can get into.
Yeah. Philip Edmondson. Sounds very proper. How hard is it to find the knicker set screws?
Impossible. Impossible. You make them yourself. Take it to the store and find one that threads in there. And then what you're going to want to do is cut the slot with a hacksaw or some thinner cutting blade as deep as you can. Get it almost down into the shaft. Then screw it in all the way into your skate and file it off flush on one side and file it off flush on the other side, and you've got one to work. They're almost non-existent. They disappear and yeah, they're gone. So yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anyone selling them. I'm sure someone on eBay has, but I don't think I've ever seen the screws sold. I've seen the blades sold. The blades are easier to find. The screws, What's next?
Let's see. So this is a couple questions in one. So Sheehan Creative says, unrelated to the topic at hand, but in a video from a few weeks back, you shared the Klingspor sandpaper box tip. Thank you. This leads to two questions. One, do you have any other great deals tips like that? And two, is there anywhere you would recommend getting holly wood?
Ooh, okay. Other tips. That's kind of a hard one. Not really. Make a good friend with a painter who makes their own paints, because then you can get a hold of bleached or boiled linseed oil much easier. At least that's how I got mine to begin before I started doing my own. Yeah, I don't know of any other solid tips off the top of my head, but it might be a good one to actually think through and make a video on. I'll have to think about that. Finding holly. No, good luck. Have a good friend who has holly who wants to sell you some. I know Bell Forest, I think it is, usually has some you can buy, though I haven't looked at their thing in forever. Yeah, on my website I have a map of all of the known places I know of to buy lumber around the world. And so I would usually say go to a local hardware store and ask them, and they'll probably have a good idea of someone to get it from. But off the top of my head, I don't know of a good place. I haven't needed to buy any in a while. I was given a stick of it years ago, And I have been whittling through that, and I'm about halfway through it, so it's going to be a while before I need to buy more. Unless I decide to do some French desk with stringing all over the place, and then I'll need it a lot sooner. What's next?
Ken Carlile asked, James, do you have a preferred thickness for carcass saws? I feel like my vintage one is overly thick.
Yeah, a lot of the old ones, specifically the ones in America, were a lot thicker. And I don't like that quite as much. I like about 0.035. Let me see. I love the thickness of the one from Veritas. It's right about what I want. And what thickness is it? It's actually a little thinner, isn't it? Yeah, it's 0.02. So that's a lot thinner. Let me actually measure a couple. My sash saw that I got from Jared Green, which is my new favorite saw. I use this thing all the time. It's 0.25, 0.25. And then I've got this saw falling. Here's a beautiful Atkins. I love this thing. I have it set up as a tenon saw, but it's got a steel back and it's a really thick, heavy plate. And this one is, 3.5. That one's a good bit thicker. Means it's going to be stouter, it's going to last longer, and if you really wail on it, you're probably not going to bend it quite as easily. But yeah, hope that answers your question. They're actually thinner than I thought they were.
The last question I saw in the chat, I don't remember who said it now. Can you explain the difference between a sash saw and a carcass saw?
Yes, it's just size. Sometimes teeth too. So here, make sure you go through the sizes. I have a couple videos on different saw sizes. Here, let's grab this. So when you're coming to back saws, there's basically 4 types. And yeah, there's more. And then you start getting into names, and people are like, no, that's not this, that's not that. But thankfully, with back saws, they are fairly standard, though you will still find people who want to argue with you. So at the bottom end, you have the dovetail saw. Really, really thin, detailed plate. Usually only has about 1.5 inches to 2 inches of cut depth. Not terribly long, though you can get like the stiletto and others that are longer. And this one is rip cut, though some people do like to have a hybrid cut. You are ripping when you're making dovetails, so you get that. And then you have these two. These two are both cross cut. And so this is the carcass saw and the sash saw. And the only difference with it is the sash saw is bigger. It's a deeper cut. It is a longer cut. You tend to have larger teeth on it. So let's see, what do I have on this one? This one's 14 ppi, which is a bit smaller than I normally like, but it's okay. This one I think is, what, 12? I think I don't know if he stamped it in here. I don't see it. I think it's 12, which is about what I really like for cross-cutting. So this is easier to learn because it's shorter and smaller. The carcass saw is just, it's a little easier to control. The bigger the saw is, the harder it is to control. But with a sash saw, you can do more. A sash saw can do anything a carcass can saw, but it can do bigger things much easier. And so if you have to have one, this is the one to get. Usually the sash saw is the one. Then you have the tenon saw. So we go rip, cross cut, rip cut again. And this has a larger teeth, like around 10 ppi. It's even longer. It's a much deeper cut. It's for cutting the cheeks of the tenons. So you can go through them that way. And usually, if you can only buy one saw, a lot of people think, ooh, I should get a dovetail saw, because a dovetail saw, that's where everything is. That's the ooh, ha, eh. Out of my back saws, the dovetail saw is the least used saw. Actually, probably out of my standard panel saws, I use this less than anything else in the shop. It really only comes out for dovetails or really small joinery. For everything else, it's the carcass saw and sash saw. Oops, that goes over here. Helps if I put it in the right slot. So the most used saw in my shop used to be my carcass saw. And it really is. And for a beginner, when you're starting out, get a carcass saw. It's easier to control. You will use this thing more than any other saw in the shop, and generally more than any other saw combined. It is very, very useful. The more I do it, though, the more I have to agree with Shannon Rogers. The sash saw is far more generally usable. It takes a little bit more control, But once you can master it, this will do anything that can do and even more. So usually the sash saw is what I'm going to say is the first saw. Though, yeah, I do like it. What are we got? Ooh, I dropped it. That's it. Cool. Well, we'll wrap it up. Next week, we are going to be having a guest come in, and we are going to be doing a one-on-one teaching how to saw square. Not just follow a line, but make sure that you're on the line on the other side. And that is a serious trick. So we're going to be playing with teaching someone in the shop how to saw, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with that. So stay tuned, and yeah, I think I'll do it for now. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye.
Okay.
Cool.